Here is something nobody expected to be saying out loud, least of all the people whose entire strategy depended on it never being true. The numbers are in. And for Meghan Markle, in her own home country in America, the place that was always supposed to be her safe harbor, her natural base, her guaranteed audience, they are nothing short of damning. This was meant to be the comeback story, the triumphant fresh start, the return to the country that, unlike Britain, would finally understand her, embrace her, and reward her. That was the whole plan. That was the entire bet. Instead, the cold data tells a story almost no one in her camp wanted told. Her popularity is sliding, and not gently. Her business is shrinking, and fast. And the whole grand mission, the entire glittering reinvention that was supposed to prove the doubters wrong, is starting to look like something else entirely. A slow-motion collapse, unfolding in real time, captured in figures that simply cannot be spun away. So stay with me, because over the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what is happening and why it matters far, far more than any single headline you might scroll past. We are going to look at how a once friendly, once sympathetic outlet was forced, almost against its will, to confront the cold, hard, undeniable evidence. We are going to expose how one famous and once trusted magazine has quietly transformed into something that looks a great deal less like journalism and a great deal more like a finely tuned public relations machine. And then we are going to follow the trail all the way down to the uncomfortable truth sitting at the very center of it all. That for all the glossy lifestyle features, all the smiling product launches, all the stage perfection, the actual foundations underneath are quietly crumbling away. Let me show you piece by piece exactly how it happened. Let me start with the propaganda problem, because you cannot understand the popularity collapse without first understanding the machine that has been built to hide it. There is a famous American celebrity magazine, one that millions of people once trusted, that has, in the eyes of many observers, become something close to an official mouthpiece for the Sussexes. And once you see the pattern, you genuinely cannot unsee it. Consider a recent headline from that publication. It breathlessly informed readers that Meghan Markle's coastal kitchen had everyone eyeing rustic cake stands, floral plates, and charming little finds starting at just a few dollars. Now pause on that for a second. Really pause on it. Because here is what makes it so absurd, so almost comically absurd. Almost everyone who follows this story closely knows that the kitchen in question is widely understood not to even be her real kitchen. Think about that. A glowing feature about the envy-inducing charm of a kitchen that, by many accounts, she does not actually cook in. There is a reason, observers point out, that her genuine home kitchen never seems to appear in her television show or her carefully styled photo shoots. By many accounts, it is dark, dated, and dingy, reportedly something of a quiet running joke among the locals in her wealthy coastal town. So the kitchens you see her gliding around in, slicing lemons and arranging flowers with that practiced serenity, are frequently staged in other prettier houses, rented or borrowed for the occasion. And so for a national magazine to run a gushing feature, suggesting the public is simply desperate to copy her floating wooden shelves, her gleaming copper cookware, and her little bamboo spoons, all of it staged in a house that may well have been hired for the day, that is not reporting, that is set dressing, that is theater, and it is being sold to readers as news. And one independent researcher has done genuinely remarkable work documenting just how deep this goes. She asked a simple, devastating question. When, exactly, did this magazine become Meghan Markle's personal spokesperson? And rather than just assert it, she set out to prove it, methodically, painstakingly, with the receipts laid out for everyone to see. What she found was staggering. In a single year, the magazine published an astonishing, almost unbelievable volume of Meghan Markle articles. And here is the crucial part, the part that gives the game away entirely. These were not major interviews, they were not award wins, they were not blockbuster projects or genuine cultural moments that actually dominated the wider conversation. There was no real news to justify the flood. Instead, readers were fed a relentless, grinding cycle of the trivial product launches, social media recaps, outfit breakdowns, dissecting what she wore down to the last accessory. sweet little family mentions, soft, focused glimpses of vacations, and endlessly, exhaustingly glowing lifestyle features. Month after month after month, the same stories simply repackaged in slightly different wrapping and sent back out as if they were fresh. And the formula, she noticed, never changed. Not once. Meghan, the devoted mother. Meghan, the loving wife. Meghan, the visionary entrepreneur. Meghan, the misunderstood figure, wronged by the world. Meghan, the resilient success story, rising above it all. Different headline every single time, identical narrative every single time. It is the same 5 or 6 notes played over and over, dressed in new clothes. After well over 100 articles in a single year, all of them built around the same handful of themes and the same relentlessly flattering framing, the question becomes utterly impossible to avoid. Are these people functioning as journalists at all? Or have they become, in everything but name, a personal mouthpiece? Because if the goal is simply to churn out an endless stream of celebrity fluff with no pushback, no context, no scrutiny, and no balance whatsoever, then we should be honest enough to call it what it actually is. It is a celebrity image management platform dressed up in the costume of real reporting. The magazine in this analysis has devolved into a captive mouthpiece for an image rehabilitation machine, and the archive, the sheer relentless volume of it, speaks for itself. Here is another example that perfectly captures the sheer absurdity of it all. Earlier in that same stretch, that magazine ran a piece gushing about a pair of sneakers Meghan had supposedly worn, the kind of shoes shoppers apparently find wonderfully comfortable, even, the article assured readers, podiatrist approved. The catch, the detail that makes the whole thing collapse into farce, she had worn them once, a single time, on a single trip, on a single day. And from that one fleeting, unremarkable moment, an entire promotional article was carefully spun, complete with shopping suggestions for readers eager to copy her. As one sharp observer put it, this is a woman who has effectively been reduced to the role of an influencer. And let us be absolutely clear about the magnitude of that fall. To go from being a working royal, a figure of genuine global significance, a woman who once commanded the attention of the entire world stage, to having magazines breathlessly promote a pair of shoes you happen to wear one time, that is an embarrassing, almost vertiginous descent by any measure imaginable. It is a long, long way down. And it raises a question that I think we genuinely have to start asking out loud, plainly, without flinching. Where are the financial links in all of this? Why is a major, supposedly serious magazine relentlessly promoting Meghan Markle's shoes, her kitchenware, her floral plates, her every single product launch, with the breathless enthusiasm of a paid salesperson? Are both parties perhaps quietly profiting from this cozy arrangement? Is money changing hands directly or indirectly to keep this conveyor belt of flattering coverage running? Because here is the conclusion that becomes very, very hard to escape once you start connecting the dots. That magazine is no longer operating as a genuine, independent journalistic enterprise. It has become, in effect, a captive mouthpiece, an extension of an image rehabilitation effort dressed up in the respectable clothing of a trusted news brand. And I am not saying we should ignore it entirely, because I do not believe in ignoring reporting. But I am saying that every single time one of these glowing cover stories appears, we have to understand what we are actually looking at. This material is, in many cases, coming directly from the couple themselves. The sense among many who follow this is that information flows straight from their camp to the publication and is printed more or less as received. It is not independent reporting. It is, in plain terms, a modern-day public relations machine. And here is a theory that explains the whole thing, and once you hear it, the pattern snaps into perfect, almost uncomfortable focus. Think about how big advertising actually works. When a major company buys a bumper package, they do not just get one thing. They get the billboard, plus the magazine spread, plus a guaranteed number of articles, all bundled together. There are tiers to it: the gold package, the premium package, the deluxe arrangement. You pay a certain amount of money, and in return you receive a certain guaranteed volume of coverage placed where it will be seen. Now imagine a celebrity operation running on exactly that same logic. A couple who live and die entirely by public relations, who have no traditional career generating headlines, no steady stream of genuine achievements to report, and so must manufacture their relevance instead. They desperately need stories out in the world, constantly, telling everyone that they are thriving, that everything is wonderful, that the brand is booming, that the marriage is blissful, all while the actual reality crumbles quietly around them. It is as if they walked in and bought the gold package, and now the coverage simply keeps pumping out on schedule week after week, regardless of whether a single word of it reflects the truth. And you can see the fingerprints of this everywhere if you know where to look. Eagle-eyed observers on social media have repeatedly caught it. Different publications, supposedly entirely independent of one another, running what is essentially the identical article, word for word in places, sometimes with nothing more than a single swapped photograph to disguise the duplication. The same manufactured narrative, the same flattering phrases, the same talking points, recycled and redistributed day after day after day across outlets that are supposed to be competitors. That is not how organic journalism works. That is how a coordinated public relations campaign works. That is what it looks like when a message is being pushed rather than discovered. Meanwhile, and this is the truly damning part, the genuinely serious stories, the ones that actually matter, the ones a real journalist would chase, are simply ignored, buried, left untouched. The disturbing allegations swirling around one of the couple's African charitable efforts, allegations of the most serious and horrific kind, the legal troubles connected to another of their ventures, the persistent, unanswered questions hanging over yet another of their high-profile projects. None of it surfaces in the glossy coverage, not a whisper. Instead, the message is always, monotonously, the same. Their life is great. Their life is amazing. Look at the beautiful coastal kitchen, the one that may not even be theirs. They keep pumping out the manufactured perfection while studiously, deliberately ignoring the truth that everyone outside the bubble can plainly see. It is, in the bluntest possible terms, pure propaganda. And it is built, brick by brick, on the deliberate burial of every inconvenient fact. But here is where it gets really interesting, because you can pump out all the glowing coverage you want. You can buy the gold package and run 100 flattering articles, but you cannot, in the end, fake the numbers. And the numbers have finally arrived. So stay with me, because this is the part that changes everything. For a long time, the defense was simple, and it was repeated endlessly. People in Britain might not warm to Meghan, the argument went, but America was different. America was her home turf. America was her base. America loved her. That was the whole premise of the entire operation. That single assumption was the safety net stretched out beneath everything they were attempting. No matter how badly things went in the United Kingdom, no matter how the British public turned, there would always be America. Vast and welcoming, ready to buy the products, watch the shows, and cheer her on. And now, with these figures, that net has torn wide open right down the middle. The one thing that was never supposed to fail has begun to fail. And when the safety net goes, there is nothing left between the high wire and the ground. Here is what makes this so significant, what gives it real weight. The outlet that finally broke the story down with hard evidence was, for years, broadly sympathetic to the couple. This was not enemy territory. The journalists behind the analysis had a reputation, in earlier days, for running consistently positive, even glowing coverage of them. By many accounts, he was firmly, reliably in the favorable camp. So when a voice like that turns around and starts publishing inconvenient data, you sit up and take notice, because it is not the predictable noise of a long-standing critic. It is something far more telling. It is the sound of a former ally being forced to confront reality. And why the change of heart? Because, as he himself essentially admitted, you simply cannot keep running glowing, uncritical stories forever without eventually becoming a laughingstock once the hard evidence turns decisively against you. Your own credibility is on the line. At some point, the gap between the cheerful narrative and the observable facts grows so wide that continuing to ignore it makes you look foolish or worse, complicit. So, to his genuine credit, he went looking for hard, empirical evidence rather than vibes and press releases. He rolled up his sleeves and crunched the actual data, the real, measurable figures. And what he discovered was that two enormous things were collapsing at the very same time, in near perfect step with one another, and that they appeared to be deeply, causally connected. Two falling lines moving together. And that correlation, once you see it, is almost impossible to explain away as innocent coincidence. The first collapse was in popularity. Using a respected rolling polling system, the kind that tracks public sentiment continuously over time rather than capturing it in single isolated snapshots, the analysis found that Meghan's standing among Americans fell sharply over a recent stretch. And here is the thing you need to understand about that kind of decline, because the significance is easy to miss if you do not follow these things closely. I have studied these rolling sentiment trackers for years in my own work, particularly when watching politicians and major public figures, because they are genuinely one of the best tools we have for measuring how the public truly feels about someone as the months roll by. They smooth out the noise, they reveal the real trend underneath the daily chatter. And here is what they normally show. Gentle movement, small, undramatic shifts. Up a couple of points here when someone has a hit film or a flattering profile. Down a couple of points there when they get caught in an awkward story, little ripples on the surface of the water, settling back to calm. That is the typical pattern for almost everyone. What the data showed for Meghan was nothing like that. It was not a ripple, it was a plunge. A steep, rapid, double-digit collapse in her net approval, and not over years, but over a span of just a couple of measurement periods. The bottom, in effect, fell out. Let me put that in perspective for you, because the sheer scale of it is genuinely hard to overstate. A drop that large, happening that fast, is enormous in this world. Catastrophic, even. In the field of public relations, a decline of that magnitude is precisely the kind of red alert that would trigger an emergency intervention, a full-blown reputational crisis management operation with all hands on deck. It is a 5-alarm fire in the building, sirens blaring. The trouble is, and here is the cruel irony, that kind of frantic rescue effort has already been attempted so many times, in so many different forms, the soft interviews, the lifestyle relaunches, the sympathetic profiles, the carefully staged appearances, that there may simply be nothing left in the toolkit. You can only cry crisis management so many times before the public stops responding to it altogether. The well of goodwill has been pumped dry. And then came the second collapse, the one that runs right alongside the first, in lockstep, the traffic to her online lifestyle shop. Now, this is where it gets genuinely fascinating, and where the plain story emerges with crystal clarity even when you strip out every precise figure. Over the very same period that her popularity was cratering, the number of visits to her website was sliding too. The two lines on the graph are falling together, hand in hand. But here's the detail that matters most of all. The single fact that exposes the real, structural weakness at the heart of the whole enterprise. Her business currently sells only to America. That is the entire market, the whole thing. So while her website pulls in a large chunk of international visitors from around the world, most of those people are, by definition, completely irrelevant to her actual sales. They literally cannot buy anything from her because she does not ship to them. They are people like you and me, popping over out of sheer idle curiosity, having a nosy little look to see what she has launched this week, what curious video she has dropped, what new spectacle is unfolding in the never-ending show. They are spectators at a circus, not customers in a shop. They inflate the headline traffic number while contributing precisely nothing to the bottom line. So the only number that genuinely matters for her finances is the American traffic, the real customers, the people who can actually click and buy. And that American traffic has been falling, steadily, month after month, with only the occasional small, temporary recovery before it resumes its downward slide. Over the stretch, the analyst carefully examined the number of American visitors to her shop dropped by roughly half. Half. Let that sink in for a moment. Not a dip, not a seasonal wobble, not a temporary blip that bounced right back. Roughly half of her genuinely relevant traffic simply gone, vanished in a matter of months. And remember, crucially, she was not starting from some towering, dizzying height to begin with. This is not a giant falling from the clouds. This is a decline stacked on top of an already modest, already fragile base. When you are not starting high, losing half is not a setback. It is an existential threat. Now, the careful journalist noted, quite properly, that correlation does not prove causation, and that the overlap between the two collapses might, in theory, be coincidental. And I understand exactly why he included that caveat. It is the responsible thing to do, but let us be honest with ourselves. A massive plunge in American popularity, happening at virtually the same moment as a massive plunge in American website traffic in a business that sells exclusively to America, that is not a coincidence. That is cause and effect, playing out in real time, right in front of us. When people stop liking you, they stop buying from you. It really is that simple. And if you follow the logic just one step further, the picture becomes even bleaker, even more alarming. We do not have her actual sales figures because none have ever been publicly released, and that silence is itself rather telling. Businesses that are thriving tend to shout their success from the rooftops. Businesses that are struggling tend to go very quiet about the numbers. But if her relevant sales-generating traffic has roughly halved over the period, then it is entirely reasonable to assume that her actual sales have taken a similar brutal hit, falling by something in the same ballpark. So this is no longer a story about a slow start, or a few teething problems, or the ordinary growing pains of a young enterprise finding its feet. This is a genuine, full-blown crisis. The popularity is in free fall, and the business is following it straight down into the same hole, the two collapses feeding and accelerating one another. So why is this happening? Let me give you the deeper explanation, because the numbers are only the symptom. The disease is something else entirely. And a big part of it is timing and the loss of a crucial partner. Consider what happened with her major streaming relationship, because this was a genuine body blow. At a critical, vulnerable moment, that partnership wound down. The one big, powerful name attached to her entire venture, arguably her only truly significant partner in the whole enterprise, the heavyweight backer who lent the project its credibility and its cash, effectively walked away before the venture had even reached its first anniversary. Think about the timing of that. Before the first birthday, before the thing had even had a chance to find its feet. And when your single most important backer steps back like that, the damage ripples outward through absolutely everything you are trying to do. The investment dries up overnight. The momentum, so hard to build, instantly stalls. And perhaps most damaging of all, the sense of legitimacy that a powerful, respected partner provides simply evaporates into thin air. Suddenly, you are not the celebrity with the major deal. You are the celebrity the major partner left behind. That shift in perception is poison for a brand. That loss alone did real, structural, lasting harm, and the business has visibly struggled to recover from it ever since. But the deeper problem is something that was predicted, loudly, repeatedly, and with total confidence, long before it ever came to pass: oversaturation. For a long stretch, Meghan was absolutely, inescapably everywhere. There was no avoiding her. Every single week brought something new to consume. A magazine interview here, a product launch there, a streaming special, a glossy photo spread, a high-profile public appearance, a carefully staged, soft-lit glimpse into the enviable lifestyle. It was relentless. It was a fire hose. It simply never, ever stopped. Not for a single week. And the public eventually did exactly what every public throughout history has always done when it is oversaturated with one person. They got tired, they got bored. They began to feel that creeping sense of fatigue that turns curiosity into irritation. and then they tuned out completely. There is a hard, immovable limit to how much of any single human being people can absorb before exhaustion sets in, before the very sight of that face triggers a weary sigh rather than a flicker of interest. And she blew straight past that limit at full speed, apparently never noticing the warning signs. The more she pushed, the more the audience pulled away. Familiarity in her case did not breed affection. It bred fatigue, and then indifference, and finally something close to ridicule. And then came what may have been the single most damaging move of all, the great pivot. After years of carefully positioning themselves as two brave souls who had escaped a cruel and heartless institution, after building an entire public identity around everything they had supposedly been forced to endure, the couple suddenly, jarringly flipped the script. They began, in effect, trying to be taken seriously as royals all over again. They started sending signals that they wanted to be welcomed back into the fold, that they wanted the family's support and recognition, that they wanted the grand occasions, the official roles, the institutional backing, all the trappings of the very life they had so publicly and so bitterly walked away from. And this, predictably, backfired on a truly epic, almost spectacular scale. Think carefully about why it backfired so badly, because the logic is airtight. The remaining loyal fan base, the diehards, the ones who had stuck by them through absolutely everything, through every controversy and every misstep, had done so for one specific reason. They believed the story of the escape. They believed, sincerely and passionately, in the narrative of two heroic figures fleeing a wicked, oppressive institution that had wronged them at every turn. That story was the entire foundation of their loyalty. It was the glue. So when those very same two people suddenly appeared to be sniffing back around that exact institution, quietly asking to be let back in, seeking its approval and its embrace after spending years publicly trying to tear the whole thing down, even the most devoted, most committed supporters felt the ground lurch beneath their feet. Hang on just 1 minute, they began to think. You told us this family was cruel. You told us they were wicked, that they wounded you, that you had no choice but to flee for your very survival. You did everything in your power to damage them, to expose them, to diminish them. And now? Now that all of your grand independent ventures have fallen apart, now that the projects have failed and the deals have evaporated and the bridges have burned to ash, now you want back in? That glaring, irreconcilable contradiction shattered what little credibility remained. They had lost the critics long, long ago. But with this pivot, they began hemorrhaging the believers too. And when you lose the people who defended you no matter what, you have truly lost everything. There is no one left to catch you. And the self-inflicted wounds kept coming, one after another. Picture the jarring contrast that played out within a single recent stretch of just a day or so. On one hand, a serious, high-minded public appearance, full of weighty talk about important causes, things like protecting vulnerable children in the online world. The very picture of a thoughtful, substantive advocate stepping onto the global stage. And then, within that very same narrow window, almost in the same breath, a bizarre, frivolous, faintly ridiculous social media post that completely undercut the serious image she had just tried so hard to project. The whiplash is genuinely dizzying to watch. One moment, the grave and concerned humanitarian, speaking of weighty matters. The next, something that veers much closer to unintentional comedy. The two images cannot coexist. They actively destroy each other. It is as if the entire operation is mashing a self-destruct button over and over again, seemingly unable to decide whether it wants to be respected as a serious force in the world or simply to chase clicks and attention and viral moments, and in frantically trying to be both at once, it manages to be neither. The serious people stop taking her seriously, and even the entertainment seekers grow weary of the act. You cannot win the room when you keep changing which room you are even in. So where does this leave the business? Bluntly, in a perilous place. The traffic that actually matters has collapsed. The popularity that drives that traffic has collapsed alongside it. The major partner has walked. The fan base is fracturing. And the brand itself carries a problem that may be fatal. Because here is the branding trap she is caught in. and it is a vicious one. She has, by all appearances, finally recognized that her current venture is struggling badly and that she may need to pivot toward beauty or perhaps fashion, the very areas she reportedly turned away from earlier in this whole saga. But here is the cruel question. How does she actually do it? Every path is blocked. If she launches a shiny new line under her existing brand name, she is building it directly on top of a foundation that is already widely perceived as a failure, dragging all that accumulated baggage along with her. Any branding expert on earth would tell you flatly that this is a serious mistake. You do not attach a fresh product to a tarnished name and expect magic. But here's the trap closing from the other side. If, instead, she launches under a brand new name to escape that baggage, then she immediately ends up competing directly against herself. She would be running one failing brand while simultaneously trying to prop up another struggling brand right beside it, splitting her limited resources, her limited attention, and her limited goodwill across two ventures that are both fighting for survival. She would be her own rival. There is no clean exit from this. Every door leads back into the same room. She is boxed in comprehensively by her own earlier choices and the public's hardened feelings. And consider the comparison that keeps coming up, because it is genuinely instructive and it sharpens the whole problem into focus. Think of another famous figure who built a fashion brand. In that particular case, the brand itself was actually respected. People liked it, the product had genuine credibility within the demanding world of fashion, earning real recognition on its own merits. And yet, even with all of that going for it, even with a likable product and genuine industry respect, it still took years upon years and an absolutely enormous fortune poured in relentlessly by a very wealthy partner before it finally, slowly turned a corner towards success. Years of patience, a bottomless well of money, a product people already admired. That is what it took. Now contrast that, carefully, with Meghan's situation. Her problem is the reverse, and arguably far, far worse. It is not that she has a beloved product trapped in a temporary financial hole, waiting for patient investment to pull it free. No. Her problem is that the brand itself appears to be actively disliked by the very public she needs to win over. The product is not respected and starved of cash. The product is, by many accounts, resented, and the name attached to it carries baggage rather than goodwill. And on top of that fundamental disadvantage, she does not have an endless, bottomless fortune standing patiently behind her, ready to absorb years and years of losses while she slowly figures it all out. The money, by every indication, is finite. There is no bottomless well to draw from. There is no patient billionaire backer prepared to lose money for a decade. The clock is ticking, and the bank balance is shrinking. That is the trap. To build a successful brand, in the example we just considered, took deep pockets, a likable product, and years of patience. Meghan, by contrast, faces a public that appears to dislike her core brand, a finite supply of money, and a mounting sense of urgency. The runway is short and getting shorter. So let us be honest about what the realistic options actually are at this point, because they are narrowing fast. One path is to simply shut the current venture down entirely, cut the losses, consign it to the scrap heap, and walk away. Give away the remaining unsold product to genuinely worthy causes, send it somewhere it might actually do some good in the world, rather than gathering dust in a warehouse, and start completely fresh under a different identity, perhaps one built around fashion or beauty. On paper, it is a clean break, a reset, a chance to begin again with the lessons learned. But here is why even that path is strewn with thorns. Even if she shuts it all down and starts over, the fundamental problem refuses to go away because it was never really about the product in the first place. The public sentiment is what it is. The feelings people hold are baked in now, hardened by years of overexposure and contradiction and self-inflicted damage. You can change the name on the company. You can change the label on the jar. You can change the entire category of what you sell. But you cannot so easily change how people feel about the person whose face and name are attached to all of it. And that, in the end, is the inescapable trap. The brand was never just a brand. The brand was her. And you cannot rebrand yourself out of being yourself. There is a certain grim irony in suggesting she give the surplus product away to those in need. Because the people who have been through genuine hardship have surely been through enough already, without being handed jars of a struggling celebrity's unsold goods as some kind of consolation. The whole image of it, the failed luxury lifestyle product repackaged as charity, only underlines how far the grand vision has fallen from the soaring promises of the beginning. And that brings us right back to where we began. Because all the glossy magazine features in the world, all the gold package coverage, all the staged kitchens, and the influencer shoe promotions cannot paper over what the data has now made undeniable. The popularity is in free fall. The business is shrinking toward a cliff edge. The partners are walking. The believers are drifting away. And the manufactured image of a thriving, beloved success story is colliding, at last, with the cold arithmetic of reality. This was always going to happen. So many people saw it coming from a mile away, and they said so again and again, while being dismissed and mocked for it. They warned that the relentless oversaturation would inevitably breed fatigue. They warned that the glaring contradictions would inevitably breed distrust. They warned that you simply cannot spend years publicly tearing down an institution and then turn around and expect to be warmly welcomed back into it. And they warned, above all, that no amount of slick public relations, no gold package, no army of friendly headlines could indefinitely outrun the plain truth forever. And here we are. Every one of those warnings has now hardened into cold data. The predictions have become numbers on a chart. And numbers, unlike narratives, do not lie. They cannot be spun. They cannot be reframed. They simply sit there, stubborn and undeniable, telling the truth that the headlines refuse to. So as you watch the next glowing headline roll out, and there will be a next one, and another after that, the next breathless feature about a charming coastal kitchen or a pair of remarkably comfortable sneakers, I want you to remember what is really happening underneath all that careful gloss. A popularity rating in steep, sustained decline. A website quietly losing the only customers who actually matter to it. A brand the public does not seem to want at any price. A major partner already gone. A loyal fan base fracturing and drifting away. And a finite pile of money draining steadily away with no real income arriving to replace it. The polished image and the cold reality have finally, decisively split apart. For years, they were held together by sheer force of public relations, by volume, by repetition, by the gold package pumping out story after story. But the data has now driven a wedge between the two that no headline can close. And in the end, in every story like this one, reality always wins. It is patient, and it is relentless, and it cannot be bought. The only real question left hanging in the air is how much longer the gold package can keep the beautiful illusion alive, and what happens on the inevitable day when the money finally runs dry and the truth is the only thing left standing in the room. Keep watching. Because if these numbers are any guide at all, that day may be arriving far sooner than anyone in that glossy magazine would ever dare to print.